How many Brits are currently on Rhodes?
Well, it's difficult to be absolutely sure. The figure is between 7 and 10,000. And obviously the first point I want to make is that our hearts go out to people who will be on their holiday suffering a very anxious and worrying experience.
What about Corfu? Do we know how many are on Corfu?
We're not sure how many are on Corfu, but the position in Corfu is very different. The fires are not taking place in residential areas or holiday areas, and although some people were temporarily moved, they've now been sent back to their accommodation. So the position in Corfu is very different from Rhodes.
What's the Foreign and Commonwealth Office doing as far as stranded Brits are concerned on Rhodes?
So we've immediately deployed a rapid deployment team of 6 of our own officials who are experts in these matters. They're deployed to the airport in Rhodes, as along with 4 Red Cross experts too. So they are on the ground, and it's important to recognise that only something like 10% of the island of Rhodes is caught up in this dreadful disaster. And there's been a very good and strong reaction from the local services, from the Greek tourists and other emergency services, and we're doing everything we can. At the airport, we're able to help with anyone who's got difficulties in liaising with their tour operator, and also, of course, if there's any difficulties on documentation.
I was about to ask you what happens, because we're hearing from people who've had to flee their hotels and get into boats, banana boats, whatever they were telling us about and reading about in the papers this morning. So that would, by necessity, mean they've left their documentation, passports and the like, back in their hotel room. Can they get home? Yes,
that's one of the key reasons that we've deployed this forward team to the airport, to sort out all those sort of problems of documentation, because, as you say, that is exactly what happens. People leave without the necessary documents. Sometimes they leave just in the clothes that they are wearing. So our team there will be sympathetic and supportive in trying to make sure that they are able to get home.
Are you expecting the situation to get worse before it gets better?
You know, it's very difficult to say. Literally, it depends on which way the wind blows and how fiercely it blows. But we will do everything we can to make sure that people who have had a dreadful experience on what should be a happy time on their holiday, we'll do everything we can to look after them in all ways we can.
Would you fly to Rhodes on holiday at the moment?
Well, I think I probably wouldn't, but I would definitely take the advice of my tour operator, both in terms of Rhodes, but also in case there were other locations which they could offer me away from where these fires were taking place.
That's one of the problems, isn't it? Because we've been hearing from Brits who say that companies like Jet2 and Chewy, they have literally left them in their hotels without any guidance or advice at all. That's not appropriate, is it?
Well, I think the tour operators can and should be as close as possible to the people whose holidays they have organised and who've paid them for doing that. We will look into any problems and issues, of course, but with 7,000 to 10,000 people there, as of last night, there had only been 20 specific requests for support from the British authorities, and all 20 of those we've been able to help.
What sort of help was needed?
Well, I think it's people arriving at the airport or people wanting to know what they do when they get there, what they should do in respect of documentation, what they should do in respect of their tour operator.
And as far as these anecdotal stories are concerned about these tour operators leaving people to their own devices at hotels, not acceptable.
No, but I'm sure that the tour operators will be doing everything they can now. They may have had a slow start, but I'm sure they'll be doing everything they can to support the people whose holidays they have organised and who, after all, have paid them for that support.
Just looking at your advice, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office advice on the website this morning, saying in the first instance, please contact your airline or travel operator who can assist you with return travel to the UK. Do you expect that advice to be changing anytime soon?
Well, if it's necessary to change it, then of course it will. But operators are sending aircraft to Rhodes, which are basically either empty or nearly empty, and so that they will be then able to bring people back. And therefore, I think in terms of any return to UK or any alternative holiday arrangements, it is right to consult your tour operator.
Any likelihood that you might be updating the advice soon?
If necessary, we will certainly update it, but at the moment, that is the advice.
How often are you looking at that? Is it on an hourly basis or...?
All the time. As I said, there's a forwardly deployed team on the ground at the airport, but they are in constant contact with the Foreign Office here in London, and if there is any need to change that advice, we will do so immediately.
On a wider topic, the fact that we can see what's happening in Rhodes, we can see what's been happening in southern Italy, we can see what's happening in Corfu. Does that make you perhaps think again about what we should be doing as far as this government's climate change plans are concerned?
You know, the government has got the best reputation. It's had the most effective response to net zero of any G7 country. We are ahead of most of the targets which we set, but we've also had an expanding economy at the same time. And the government's really got to get the balance right between doing the right thing to tackle climate change, which is, as these events, horrific events show, absolutely real and live at the moment and deteriorating and getting worse, but also to try and defend our constituents and people in the UK from rising prices. And therefore, the government has intervened to do that, both in terms of energy costs and, for example, during the pandemic, but also, as the Prime Minister makes clear, his number one task is to get inflation down. And we saw some encouraging figures in that respect last week.
OK, and then you see somebody like Michael Gove, the Levelling Up Secretary, flanked by the Prime Minister later on today, who's going to urge a slowing down in green planning targets.
I think that you can do both. I think you can pursue net zero, which is critical both for our country and for the planet. But you can also protect people from rising prices. And that's what we did, for example, when the electricity prices went up. The government stepped in to defend families and individuals. So it's not an either or. You can do both. And under this government's leadership, we will.
Does the result in Uxbridge last Thursday night into Friday morning point to voters wanting a slowdown in your green message?
I think it shows that the ULEZ scheme that the Labour mayor had put in place was the wrong scheme. It was the wrong time and it was conducted in the wrong way. But I think overall what Uxbridge shows is that those who've written off this government at the next election have done so prematurely and that the next election is wide open. Sigh of relief Friday morning?
You're allowed to smile a little bit there.
I went... It was better than the alternative.
Yeah, you won one, but only just.
Yes, I think that if you look at the betting odds and what the pundits were saying, that we were all set to lose all three, and therefore it was a relief that that was not the case on Friday morning.